Brand loyalty is a huge thing. If you don't believe me, ask any Prusa owner what they think of other printers. I'm joking. They'll tell you even if you don't ask. Again, I'm joking. Please know that this and the thumbnail are entirely meant in good humour, but it's a statement I wanted to make up front because I've got a direct follow-up to bookend the video. So a couple of months back I tested the Mark IVs, and whilst I can understand the value of the Prusa machines goes far beyond the value of the raw hardware itself, I could also understand why at its price point it wasn't among the most popular printers on the market. Here we are 2 months later and Prusa have sent me its much bigger brother, the Prusa XL, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of a general everyday printer user. And I'd love to say that I love this machine, but the truth of it is, I don't. Oh, there go the comments already. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Look, honestly, genuinely, the last thing I want to do is start a riot with or against Prusa fans, which, yes, I probably should have thought about before designing the thumbnail, title, and opening statements, but stick with me because it'll make sense. The thing is, you can't really review a Prusa machine without addressing the die-hard evangelical nature of the online Prusa fan, because it's kind of part of the value. There's no doubt the Prusa XL is an impressive machine. I've always said I like the style of these in terms of colour scheme anyway, but this thing could also be described as monstrous, in good ways and bad. And if you check out the official enclosure for this, then come on, let's be fair, looks-wise it does come across as something halfway between makeshift and an accordion. But as for the printer itself, yeah, it's huge. The 360-degree cube build volume is certainly on the upper end of larger printers. What matters to me though, and I think most of my audience of general printer users, is what these things are like to set up and use. And well, this one's all set up. Setup was long. Now, to be fair, I was filming it throughout the process, which made it considerably longer, but from getting it out the box to doing its first print, well, I started one Friday evening and didn't finish it until the next Saturday afternoon. And relatively, I've assembled much larger bed slinging printers in half the time than what this took. Now, before I got this, I ignorantly half expected this to be the usual case of plug in the screen, the filament roll holder, and connect up the tool heads. After all, my experience with the Mark IVs was little more than take it out of the box and turn it on. But this is a very different beast. Even once it's all connected up, there are a number of further tweaks to make. Each nozzle seal needs to be calibrated to the correct height. You need to fit extruder socks, which, to be fair, is a step I'm only pointing out because I struggled with it until I realized I could twist the heat block. Yeah, I told you, I'm a general printer user. But then you need to go through another lengthy process with each tool head to calibrate the docking position. That's before testing the load cell, calibrating the filament sensor, and then screwing in a pin to the center of the bed in order to calibrate the offset of each and every tool. So if the price alone wasn't enough of a marker, I think it's clear from the setup process that this is a machine aimed more towards people who are into the technology of 3D printers rather than the fun-time joy hobby of 3D printing. But whilst this was a long process, I have to call out the level of detail that goes into these Prusa build guides. Every step was detailed to a level I've never seen before, and I'm sure anyone experienced in a bed slinger from the last few years would at least appreciate this in comparison to the typically limited and poorly translated booklets we normally get, which is pretty much just a few pictograms of what roughly goes where. But throughout the latter half of this process, most of it walks you through on the screen. But when it came to using this machine for the first time, well, this is where the fun really began. I had some interesting learnings to do. Don't get me wrong, this wasn't bad, but I did have a couple of issues. One of them was one of the hot end fans not coming on during the calibration, and another issue which was layer peeling. And whilst the solution to this wasn't hard, it gave me a chance to check out Prusa's support, and I have to say, yeah, they were as so many people described. Incredible. And I also have to say, yes, I did ask their permission to record the chat. But yeah, not only is this team available 24/7, but I actually got more info out of them in diagnosing and resolving these problems than I often get out of speaking with other brands over the course of weeks. This is like proper technical support. Like, you know, if you buy a PC from somewhere and it breaks down and you ring up that company and get modern technical support on your issue, it's like that. Whereas most other brands are very difficult to understand and often result in you wanting to send it back or pull your hair out. So during this chat, we confirmed that one of the issues was a loose cable, which is easily reseated because you can easily get access into the hot end parts. And the peeling issue was due to my placement of a print, this toolbox, which was just on the inner edge of one of the separately heated print zones. The zone worked fine, as subsequent prints proved, but it was great to have support there to properly explain to me the understanding of the functionality in these separate heating zones, which was a feature I haven't really come across before. But this was basically because I'd put my print right on the inner edge of that zone, so the printer decided not to heat up the zone on the right-hand side of the plate. And unfortunately, due to my garage where I work being cooler than most people's rooms where they'd have them, the cold creeping in was just too much for this PETG filament to adhere. And these zones are clearly laid out in the slicer, so all I had to do was move it to the left a little bit to put it right in the middle of two zones, and I was able to get this print out perfectly, whilst also saving a little bit of energy because now I had two complete zones on the printer that didn't need to heat up at all. So I'm sure I'm not alone in seeing the value of jumping online with educated tech support over the process of guessing my way through online forums, and this is especially useful if you are someone who's more of a beginner. And I have to say, my observation of the print quality of this machine is good. Is it any better than other modern machines? Honestly, not that I've noticed. I actually thought the Mark IV's was a little better than this. And there are still some functional elements of this machine that do deter me a little further, but as you'll see in my conclusion, I think it's okay that they do. So we all know the big deal is the multiple heads on this machine, right? That's its unique selling point. I'd like to hear from anyone who sees the value in one of these with a single head, because with a single head, yes, you've got the Prusa value, but it's also just a large printer. And that intrinsic Prusa value isn't something to be sniffed at, in fairness. Just look at the history of these machines. I think it's fair to say that these printers are more of an investment because Prusa is still supporting and updating many of their earliest machines. So if you buy into this brand, you've got confidence that you'll get support for your purchase for years to come. But at the same time, this technology has moved on so rapidly in the last two, it is a fair counterpoint that depending on usage, you might be looking for an upgrade by the time it comes to needing to replace any important parts anyway. But back to talking about this and having its multiple heads. On the outset, it's absolutely fantastic. Multiple colours with less purge waste, more speed, multi-material too, and without having to wait for nozzle temperature changes between filament types, and far less risk of issues with flexible materials like TPU getting stuck in the mechanism. In fact, with many of the automated multi-material units I've had, I've also had to deal with my fair share of random jams. So this multi-head approach is expensively brilliant. But I also find the way this is implemented is a bit of a double-edged sword for the average user. For example, the reels are held externally on the printer, so they're open to the elements, which means moisture. But yes, fair enough, this is something you could fix by purchasing an external device, or, well, yeah, if you've got this, then you've got a 3D printer. You can easily print and build a better solution, just as many people have. But for me, as a general printer user, the bigger convenience of other automated material change systems has often been that I can just lazily push the end of the filament into a hole and then have the system do the rest of the loading process for me, just with risk of the occasional and annoying jam. But it's also helpful having RFIDs going as far as telling the printer what filament is loaded, and that's a handy benefit that this one doesn't have. With the XL, you need to tell the printer to go through the change material process, tell it what material type you're putting in so it can get the temperatures right, then manually feed in the new material inch by inch until it enters the hot end, and you can't actually tell the printer what color the material is on the UI. That all needs to be done manually in the slicer each time. And I really wish you could do this in the UI and then just sync up to the slicer so the slicer knows what colors are where. And I know I can hear the comments already, this is a petty thing, but again, general printer person. So I, and I'm sure many others, prefer the convenience of machines that just do these activities for us so we can focus on just printing stuff. And when it comes to the UI, just like the slicer, this is a much more technical interface than what we're getting from other modern machines that every brand seems to be copying. Other than the occasional caricature pop-up of Prusa himself, this has no real pictograms or big buttons you can press. This is a series of hierarchical menus, and you know what? It's well laid out, incredibly well translated, and everything makes sense. But having touchscreen functionality still seems a little more limited, as the interface needs to be laid out in this way to be compatible with this control dial, which is an element that's kind of reminiscent of older printers. I just think that's a bit more of a legacy method of printer operation for the average user. But again, I know I'm going back and forth on this one. I can see it from both sides because I want to be objective, but I think that's the real key differentiator here. This isn't a machine for the average user, far from it. This is a home engineering tool. So whilst, yeah, sure, I can piss and moan about this not being an easy to use printer, it wasn't made to be. I know I have viewers looking at the functionality assessments I've made, rolling their eyes at those being non-issues or knowing they can print and install upgrades and workarounds to create the features they want, and that is totally fair. You see, where I looked at the Mark IV's and determined it was good for those people who just want to buy into the Prusa ecosystem, which, yes, as I've said, does have its own value, it was hard to recommend when there are other machines that provide good enough print quality with more accessibility features at a lower price. It's hard to see as something directly competitive in its own market. For print farms and the like, sure, because if something goes wrong, yes, it's a bed slinger, but all of the parts are easily accessible and replaceable, so you don't need to strip down a whole machine just to replace a few components if something does go wrong and you need to do maintenance to get it working again. So as I said, I don't see the value in that, or at least I understand the lack of popularity in that one for the average home user. With this one though, it is much easier to see the value because, well, first off, it does something that no other machine does, and it isn't really competing in the same market as anything else because it's so obviously aimed at the more technical user from unboxing through setup to use. And I wanted to talk about the passion for the Prusa community, or the passion within the Prusa community in this video, because I'm here trying to be an objective product reviewer for the everyman printer, and yeah, Prusa is one of those brands that stirs the hornet's nest of community opinion, so, well, I can't just ignore it, can I? So generally, on one side of the fence, we've got people arguing that Prusa machines are outdated and too expensive. And I've used the term too expensive rather than overpriced because, let's be fair, a lot of the price can easily be understood by the labour costs of a Western-run company. And the other side are arguing the quality, reliability, unrivaled level of customer support, the kind of support that you hope from a Western-based company rather than the email and pray language barrier responses you get from pretty much everyone else if you get a response. And sat in the middle of this, being so on the fence that it feels like I've got splinters in my arse just trying to say what my experience with a printer was like and looking through the fights, yeah, I can see both arguments are mostly correct. The issue with a lot of these fights I see is that it's just a matter of perspective, what you value and what you want your printer for. And I want to bring it up because I recently saw a really good video by Frank from Frankly Built, which was, I think it was a good PSA regarding the state of the 3D printing community, and I think it encourages us more to work together. It's a good watch, I'll put a link in the description. The point is, you may love Prusa, you may love another brand, and for your own reasons, you're right. But it's all regardless anyway, because we all love 3D printing. Being hands-on with this machine myself now, just like with the Mark IV, I've got to say, I do get it, I do. It's beyond overkill for me as a home user, which I'll admit, but I understand the passion for this brand. They aren't frustrating to work with or letting people down, which, unless you've had your head under a rock in the 3D printing world, you know exactly what I'm talking about lately. So when it comes to this machine, I'd say it's much like my experience with the Soval SB08. The lack of bullshit marketing, but this time coupled with the building experience, does create more of an affinity with the product than simply taking it out of the box and turning it on. And I know we do still do a lot of building with other FDM printers, but, and as soppy as it sounds, actually having Prusa hold my hand and educating me about the parts and functionality during the building journey, and me caring enough to understand the calibration steps, has brought me closer to this machine than most. I do genuinely feel more invested in it just from the way I was educated through using it. So yeah, they charge a premium for this machine, but there's no doubt you get a premium experience. That's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be for many people. I'd still genuinely like to see a product from Prusa that bridges the gap between technical machine and user-friendly printer, but maybe this is it. Maybe they've found their niche in the printer hobbyist versus the printing hobbyist, and that's unlikely to ever be the most popular choice of printer on the market. But people are buying and loving them, so there is a market for it. I think for the people who want to really invest in this hobby, with this you'll be buying into a very active and supportive community, backed by a brand who really do put quality first. So while some will see this as buying in, others will see it as selling out. But I know, and especially lately, a brand's history is a huge consideration for many people, and so far, Prusa have in the most part kept their customers very happy. And I'm not even asking you to take my word for it. If you don't believe me, just go and check out any of their Facebook groups versus most other brands. So I'll say at the end what I said in the beginning with a slight change. Brand loyalty is a huge thing. If you don't believe me, ask a Prusa owner what they think of their printers. How much does brand loyalty matter to you? Please let me know down in the comments. I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our members. Thank you so much. You are on screen now. Please consider joining them for early access, Discord roles, and exclusive videos. Until next time, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it. Fohammer out.